Hello everybody, how you doing today? Hope you're having a good day and making the most of it, because you can't do anything about the weather, you can't do anything about politics, you can't do anything about the news. So we just have to learn to make the best of what we have. If you want to get your Bibles out and turn to Hosea chapter 4, that's going to be the subject of our lesson today. And the title of the lesson is God's Problem with People. And of course, when we say this, not all people, but for the majority, yes, God has a problem with the majority of the people. See, we listen to the news and seek to know the sign of the times, and we're faced with multiplied problems in our world. We might think that it's never been this bad, but we would be wrong. The preacher said there is nothing new under the sun, there in Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 9. So we're going to go back to see what Hosea wrote, and that was nearly 2,700 years ago. And he wrote about the things taking place in his time, and a brief view will paint a picture of today as the environment we live in now. So in verse 1, Hosea writes, "Listen to the word of the Lord, O sons of Israel, for the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land, because there is no faithfulness, kindness, or knowledge of God in the land." Does that sound familiar? Well, it should. See, God most certainly can mount a case against his people, and he can mount a case against most people. You know, it's kind of like a district attorney will gather the evidence and present it to a jury or a judge so that the guilty party may be punished. See, God has a case against the Israelites of that day, and he also has a case against anyone who does not obey him today. See, faithfulness has become a joke in recent times. I mean, we're talking about spiritual faithfulness. That's just become a joke. And you know how the world portrays faithful Christians. They make a mockery of them and call them names of derision. And so the very thought or words are enough to cause snickering and persecution. So many claim to be faithful to God, yet their behavior is no different from the world around them. You know, they act, talk, behave, and even think like those who do not know God. I mean, they really do. You know, the old phrase, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck and waddles like a duck, what is it? Well, obviously, it's a rhinoceros. So you see my sarcasm there. I hope you saw the sarcasm, but that's what this world wants you to think. You have all these wicked people, but yet they claim to be a Christian, but they're acting like everyone around them. And so that's the problem we're facing. And there's also very little kindness expressed in our world today. I mean, there's kindness taking place, and believe me, it's taking place all over this land, but you're not allowed to see that. The powers that be want to make sure that they keep us divided, so they're not going to show us kindness, acts of kindness anywhere. It's always somebody getting beat up or somebody throwing rocks and bricks at the police, burning down some building. I mean, they want us to think that's the way our world is. And a lot of people talking about maybe a civil war going to take place. Well, that's a strong possibility. I used to think for many years that, yeah, it's coming. I can see it coming, but hopefully it'll be long after I'm gone. But nowadays, we see the ramped up expressions of these people. We're seeing some of this stuff taking place today. And so those of us who do not believe in violence, guess what? They're just going to kill us. Just like Hitler did the Jews when he rounded them up. He's just going to kill them because they didn't fight back. And so we have to be aware that this is a very strong possibility. All right, so we may note a few individuals who show kindness to others, but most people do not care if they are kind or not, as long as they get their way. See, that steps into the whole problem right there. Selfishness. As long as people get what they want, then they'll do what benefits them. If showing an act of kindness is going to benefit them, then they'll do it. If showing a little bit of hatred is going to benefit them, they'll do that also. So these people just do, by their selfishness, they're going to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. And so it is also true that many people do not know God. See, most of our population in this world is unchurched. In other words, a lot of them have never even been to a church building. And then most of the population, they have no respect for God or His Word. And even in many places that claim to believe in God and respect His Word, they abuse it, they mistreat it, and they kind of treat it like it's an obsolete thing, and it doesn't apply to them. And so that's why you see all these things which God calls sin being approved by all these so-called religious leaders. And so they don't respect God or His Word, and they certainly do not want to follow His laws. And so that produces many problems in our society today. And so it's no different than back then. Hosea was right, and it's just as appropriate today. See, in verse 2 of chapter 4, he says there is swearing, deception, murder, stealing, and adultery. They employ violence so that bloodshed follows bloodshed. And, that's happening in our world today, even in this country. I mean, we've watched it take place in other countries for a long time. Now it's actually here. So you cannot go hardly anywhere without having to endure foul and inappropriate language. And that's true. You're getting around anywhere, you're going to hear bad language. And maybe you might ask people to not use that language in your presence. And do they apologize? No. They're more likely to swear at you and more vehemently and call you all sorts of names. So, and then of course the next thing, the lying that takes place, the deception. It's almost the point where we think everybody lies. In our world, that's just a gimme, or so we think. See, politicians lie. Oh yeah, they're always lying. How do you know if a politician's lying? Their lips are moving. And so that's what we've come to learn. That's what we've come to expect. So whatever they say, we know is a lie, but sometimes people just want to follow along with it. See, the news media, people lie. I mean, a lot of them do. I mean, there's actually very few true journalists and true news media people out there. They're all trying to press their agenda. And so if they have their determination that you shouldn't like something, they're going to tell you shouldn't like it, and they'll give you all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't like it. So sometimes preachers lie, at least those who are not preaching the truth. I mean, they're creating a deception, and those hearers are going to fail God, and they don't know it. Jesus talked about the blind leading the blind. Both shall fall into the ditch. That's true. When a preacher teaches false doctrine and the people believe it, guess what? They're going to be lost. And that is a tragedy, because there's a lot of good people out there thinking that they're on the pathway to heaven when they're actually not. And so that's why we as Christians, true Christians, need to tell them these things and show it to them. Then it's on them. I mean, we show them from the Bible what God said, and then it's on them. All right. We also know murder is a big problem in our country and around the world. And most murder occurs upon the innocent of our land. Yet few people believe in the sanctity of life. Abortion is a blight upon this country. And millions of young children, young babies, are being slaughtered. And guess what? People cheer that. I mean, they're happy about that. And they don't want to deprive these women of destroying their own babies. And they don't want to let that happen. And they cheer and promote those organizations that do the same thing. And they talk about it as a right to my body, but you have a different body in there. And that child apparently has no rights. And that's the way it is. All right, so, and then of course, considering the sanctity of life, we see things nowadays where people have no regard for others, and they do things. They don't care about someone else's life. They'll get smack drunk and get in their car and drive down and might kill somebody. Well, it's not their fault. It is the fault of the the drug or the alcohol they had consumed, and so they get a light sentence because it really wasn't them doing it. Well, see, that's why it's so wrong for this drunkenness, so wrong for drinking. And we also know men and women are cheating on each other, and a lot of them are turning to prostitutes, and that just seems to be the norm. They want to go out with their friends. The husbands go to one bar and the women go to another bar, and they usually hook up with somebody after they get wasted or get a few too many drinks down them. And, oh well, that's just normal. That's what they say. See, those who manage to stay faithful to each other and married for many years, really, that's an oddity in our world. I mean, sometimes you get a group of people, how many people have been married longer than 5 years? You might have one or two hands go up, but that may be it. I mean, so that is a rarity in our world today. And so adultery takes place rampantly. And so, and then of course, lately we've seen a lot of violence is used so much in our society. And when people get violent, they make threats along with that. So a lot of people just capitulate and give in to what they're screaming. Whether it's actually logical or not, they're going to do that. So they have to tear down statues and change names and all sorts of things like that. And so, I mean, if things don't change, they're going to have to stop selling white paint at the hardware store. And because that's basically a very bad thing. White is bad, so they say. And so depending on who is killed, there might be retribution for that from friends or family and from people, strangers even. See, the gangs, they mark their territory, and if a rival gang member even crosses into their land, the territorial gang seems to feel it's a sense of honor to go ahead and kill that one. Next thing you know, there's retribution, and the other gang comes and kills one of theirs. And it's, in some ways, it's considered an honor killing. And we've heard of that. In some cultures, they consider killing their own family members if they feel the member has dishonored the family. And so young ladies have been butchered up and killed for doing nothing more than maybe putting on some lipstick and some makeup, and because they're doing the Western ways. And so it's that way. When they make friends of people who aren't Muslim, sometimes they are killed for that reason also. Now in Hosea 4 and verse 3, it says, "Therefore the land mourns, and everyone who lives in it languishes, along with the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky, and also the fish of the sea disappear." See, we saw this in the last couple of centuries in our country when various mining methods destroyed much of the forest, the lands, and the waterways. And then, of course, chemical factories, they were dumping their waste into the rivers, and it caused much harm to not only the nature, but also anybody who might be living downstream that is their source of water. And so it's that way. And so, yes, we're glad they put in the laws to protect the environment. And yes, that makes our nation, our land, a little bit more beautiful. But we still have to be taking caution when you go out. You just can't go into any stream and start drinking water out of it. I mean, there's all sorts of chemicals and things that could be there. So we have to take our own bottled water. All right. Very few people consider that they have it better now than their parents did. I mean, that's something. See, the generation that was right before mine and my generation were dying out. And this was really the last generation to see prosperity. And for the most part, most people are just trying to hang on and make it through until they get to the grave. See, the hope of our great country has turned into question and despair. And that's very true. I mean, the potential is still there. There's no doubt about it. And I believe the idea of making this country great again is possible. But they're trying to find ways of making it great without the only true thing that will fix it, and that is God. In verse 4 of chapter 4, yet let no one find fault, and let none offer reproof, for your people are like those who contend with the priests. See, that's one thing we've noticed in recent times, is the fact that no individuals are at fault for what they might do. And so they blame it. Not only the people who do these things, but the news media kind of joins in and participates. They blame it on politics, religion, society, environment, and other factors. Yet no one blames the person who commits the crime. So there's always an extenuating circumstance. Well, he burned down the building. Why? Well, because the mob told him they wanted it burned down, so he burned it down. So it's not his fault that he burned it down. These people aren't going to be charged with arson, and they're doing things like that. They're shooting others. They're killing others. And yet the person who does the crime is usually not responsible for that crime, or at least that's how it's going to be if you listen to the news media and others. But when a person breaks the law and causes harm, have you noticed who gets penalized? Well, yes, you do. It's not the person who broke the law. It's the law-abiding citizens who are punished. You know, some guy goes out and kills somebody else with a gun. Well, let's ban all the guns. And the law-abiding citizens, which there are a lot of, they're told they can't own guns anymore. They have to give up their right of protection. And so our freedoms we used to enjoy, they're being taken away and replaced by a more controlling force. It's the wickedness, the violent force that's going to be taking place. You know, we saw recently with all the violence going on, the mayors of these cities just let them express themselves and don't get involved. And I mean, millions and millions of dollars of property damage because of this, people dying because of this. And then, of course, we see the controlling forces acquire so much power, they abuse such power and demand more than the law allows. See, when the prophet speaks of those contending with the priest, he is speaking of those who do not want to hear the truth, but they want to hear the smooth words. They want to hear the lies. You know, Isaiah talked about this in chapter 30. Chapter 30. All right, so now in Hosea's day, the priests had become nothing more than pawns who allowed whatever anyone wanted to do to get away with. And it was usually for a price, for a bribe. And it's like some of the religions today, when they call it indulgences, basically, you know, you want to cheat on your wife, and because you have a pretty secretary, so you go tell the priest, I'm going to have relations with my secretary. Well, you shouldn't do that, but if you pay me $10,000, I'll let you go ahead and do it, then I'll absolve you of your sin. I mean, where do you find that? That's not there. So some religions allow this to continue. And then really, when they allow this type of abuse of God's law, then it's no wonder when they abuse God's law by abusing children. And you wonder why they're so willing to put up with that and let it continue, is because the priests allow them to do what they want to do. So it's almost like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Or you cover up my sin, I'll cover up yours. And that's what it seems to be these days. So for the most part, those who contend with the priest were upset because the priests, some of them were telling them what God wanted. And people did not want or did not like the restrictions that God placed upon them. You know, Paul talked about this to Timothy in chapter 4 of 2 Timothy. And verse 3 and 4, he says, the time will come, they will not endure sound doctrine, but wishing to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers of their own accord, and then they will turn aside to myths and fables. So that's what's going on. They don't like preachers to tell the truth, so they find preachers that'll just kind of placate them and let them get away with what they want to do. And they really have no interest in serving God. They just have interest in serving their own lusts. So the faithful really need to pray about our land and its people before God gets fed up with us. And I really think one of these days, because this nation has become so wicked in the killing of babies and the killing of each other and the stealing from others and all the wickedness, I think that the time is coming. I don't know when, but I think it's going to happen. And God's going to say, okay, well, you wanted it, you got it. And he's going to put us into communism or socialism or some sort of dictatorship. And of course, when that happens, a lot of people are going to be upset and they say, but we want our rights. And so there's going to be a lot of killing. You know, the last few Marxists that gained power had to kill about 100 million people just so they can get everybody else in line. And there's even people in government today says that, well, if we're going to make this change, we're going to have to kill about 1/4 of the population to make everybody fall into line. And so, I mean, that's their theology, that's their thinking. So how long is God going to allow this nation to do this? Well, I don't know. I really believe the only thing saving this nation are the faithful who are still trying to do right in the sight of God. And I certainly pray that there's so many of them that this nation has a chance for survival. So think about these things. I mean, the lessons we have from old, as the preacher said, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, what happened in Hosea's day, Isaiah's day, is the same exact thing happening our day in our land and around the world. So consider these thoughts. A little bit long discourse today. I guess I got onto a soapbox, but anyway, consider these thoughts, and hopefully, Lord willing, we'll see you again tomorrow. And you have a good and blessed day now. Bye-bye.